Imagine a small workshop in Emilia. The heavy smell of gasoline lingers in the air, and at the center stands a man with dirty hands and a wounded pride. That man was Ferruccio Lamborghini. He wasn't chasing fame, he simply wanted to build, but everything changed with a single phrase from Enzo Ferrari. "You make tractors, don't try to teach me how to build cars." In that instant, a spark of vengeance was born. Lamborghini's response was bold. He turned to Giotto Bizzarini, the brilliant engineer who had once crafted Ferrari's winning engines at Le Mans, and gave him a simple challenge: build me an engine that will humiliate them. What came to life was the first Lamborghini V12. It wasn't just powerful, it was outrageous. Too loud, too aggressive, too alive for an ordinary road car. But that was exactly the point. This was an engine that didn't want to accompany you, it wanted to challenge you. For over half a century, it roared through legends, powered icons, and became more than machinery. It became a voice, an unrelenting cry against arrogance, a declaration of independence written in steel and fire. By the early 1960s, Ferruccio was already a successful industrialist. He had built his fortune with agricultural machines, but in his spare time, he drove Ferraris. He owned several, but each left him frustrated. Fragile clutches, rough mechanics, zero comfort. Tired of these flaws, he sought a direct conversation with Enzo Ferrari. Instead of cooperation, he was met with sarcasm and disdain. That insult struck deep, not only against Ferruccio as a businessman, but against his passion for mechanics and his vision of what a grand tourer could be. He realized then that this was about far more than fixing a clutch, it was about proving a point. Lamborghini set his sights on creating a GT car that would surpass Ferrari's, sleeker, more stable, and undeniably more powerful. But to achieve that, he needed a weapon. He needed an engine that wasn't just an upgrade, but a declaration of war. This is where Bizzarini stepped into this story. Known as one of the brightest engineers of his time, and already the mind behind Ferrari's racing V12s at Le Mans, he understood how to turn gasoline into victory. When Lamborghini approached him, the request was straightforward, but ambitious. Give me a motor that destroys Ferrari. Bizzarini delivered a design straight from Formula One, a 60-degree 3.5-liter V12 with overhead cams and vertical carburetors, producing 360 horsepower at 9,000 RPM. On paper, it was a racing engine, and that was exactly the intention: to put a heart built for the track into a car for the road. At that moment, nobody else had dared attempt something like this. Grand Tourers of the era were elegant but restrained. Lamborghini and Bizzarini were about to unleash a beast. That first V12 wasn't built to last hundreds of thousands of kilometers in silence. It was built to scream, to shake the gear lever, to make your chest tighten. It wasn't civilized, it wasn't polite, and it certainly wasn't comfortable. But that was the whole point. It was meant to provoke, to rebel, to send a message. The rest of the car came later. Bodywork, interiors, finishing touches, all designed around this mechanical heart, because what Lamborghini wanted wasn't simply a fast car, he wanted an icon. And that V12 wasn't just a lump of metal and valves, it was vengeance turned into vision, a rebellion against conformity, a mechanical roar that would define a brand for decades to come. Even the strongest hearts eventually reached their limits, and for Lamborghini's legendary V12, that moment was drawing near. By the late 1990s, the automotive world was changing dramatically. Engines were getting smaller, cleaner, and more efficient. Emission laws grew stricter every year. Ferrari had already reinvented its V12 family, BMW had moved away from high-performance 12 cylinders, and Aston Martin was repositioning theirs as luxury power plants. But Lamborghini, true to its rebellious spirit, went the opposite way. At the 2001 Geneva Salon, it unveiled something that seemed brand new, yet was rooted in the past. The Murcielago was the first Lamborghini developed under Audi's ownership, but under its hood was no German creation. It was still the same V12, updated and expanded to 6.2 liters, tuned with better electronics and tighter precision, but fundamentally the same architecture born back in the 1960s.
The block was still made of lightweight alloy. The dry sump lubrication remained. The cylinder layout hadn't changed. And you could tell instantly when it roared to life. Less like an engine, more like an untamed animal with the voice of an opera singer. After 40 years, it had become a living anachronism. In a world of filters, control systems, and muffled efficiency, this motor still screamed at 7,500 RPM with exposed manifolds and mechanical valves, unapologetic and raw. It wasn't just about power anymore. It was about honesty. A decade later, in 2011, Lamborghini unveiled the Aventador. Unlike the Murcielago, this car was new from the ground up. Carbon fiber monocoque chassis, active aerodynamics, a lightning-fast ISR gearbox. Everything was reinvented, everything more extreme. And at its core sat a brand new engine, the L539. For the first time since 1963, Lamborghini had built a clean-sheet V12. Still naturally aspirated, still 6.5 liters, delivering 700 horsepower, but also delivering a shock to the industry. Because by 2011, among all the great V12 supercars, the Aventador was the last one still breathing naturally. No turbos, no hybrids, no superchargers. Just pure atmospheric intake, just like the very first 350 GT, but now launching from 0 to 100 in 2.9 seconds and hitting 350 kilometers per hour. At a time when Ferrari had embraced turbocharging and McLaren was fully into twin turbos and composites, Lamborghini stood its ground. And it wasn't just technical stubbornness, it was about identity. For those who truly love driving, turbocharging may bring efficiency, but a naturally aspirated V12 delivers emotion. That engine wasn't simply a power unit, it was a manifesto, a cry for mechanical freedom, a love letter to raw engineering. For a full decade, from 2011 to 2021, the Aventador carried that philosophy. Each special edition, SV, SVJ, Ultima A, was another chapter in the gospel of the naturally aspirated V12. But time could not be ignored. The world was racing toward electrification, and Lamborghini knew the end was near. Before saying goodbye, they decided to let the V12 sing one last thunderous chorus. More power, more drama, more meaning. Because this was never just about speed. It was about memory, legacy, and the heritage of a sound that defined generations. Eventually, change came. Not nostalgia, but revolution. Lamborghini announced the Revuelto, its first hybrid supercar. And yes, inside the engine bay, the V12 still lived. But now it shared space with electric motors, computers, and compromises. It remained powerful, it remained brutal, but it was no longer alone. And in that sharing of power, something was inevitably lost. The V12 had not disappeared, but it had transformed. Faster, more efficient, more advanced, yes, but also further from the raw instinct that had once defined it. As if the engine itself knew, its roar now carried a faint trace of melancholy, a subtle awareness that it was giving its final performance. And so the original Lamborghini V12, the one born from pride and defiance against Ferrari, the one that roared through the Miura, Countach, and Diablo, the one that endured nearly 60 decades, did not simply die, it transcended. It became a symbol, a myth. You may not hear it often anymore, but when you do, it stays with you forever. Today, as we enter an era of silence and electrification, as the scream of combustion gives way to the whisper of motors, the question isn't whether the V12 will return. The question is whether we will still miss it. Will we remember what it felt like when driving was more than transportation? When it was visceral, physical, alive? That's the true legacy of the Lamborghini V12. It was never just about numbers or performance charts. It was about the thrill in your chest, the vibration in your hands, the unfiltered connection to the road. If you've made it this far, you probably feel it too, that not everything should be quiet, muted, domesticated. Some sounds, some sensations are not just nostalgia. They're part of why we fell in love with cars in the first place. And maybe, just maybe, they're what we risk losing if we let silence replace the roar.